to defeat. It just goes on, and I think that war on terrorism may be the same thing, the offing.
All right, Garrett Utley in New York, thanks very much. Is that right? Is that your feeling too, General Clark, that this will just go on
I'm very
and on
concerned
and on?
about this, and that's
Must
why
we always watch out for terrorism? I mean, we had to before, but even more now till the end of time?
Well, I think there will always be those who somehow react against the United States or other leading powers who are driving the pace of modernization and economic development and technological progress in the world. Whether they will always resort to force and violence to murder our citizens, that's another matter. And I think that it very much depends on how we handle this campaign now. Certainly these people who did this are embittered. They're very ideological and dogmatic, and we're not going to talk them out of what they're doing. So we have to isolate them, cut them off, bring them to justice, or otherwise handle this situation. How we do this will determine whether others follow them. And in that sense, it's a little bit different than the war on drugs because the motivation is different and the consequences are different. This is so shocking. This is so horrifying what's happened in Washington and New York City that we clearly have the moral high ground. We have the ability to mobilize most of the leadership in the entire world to come to our aid to deal with these networks. It's a very tough dilemma the president's in because Americans want rapid action, but it has to be effective action in view of our long-term objectives, not just a spasm of response to satisfy an irate American public. Goodness knows we're all angry about this, but we've got to strike smart.
Effective, and I was just going to say the word you keep using is smart, and the president said this would be a monumental battle between good and evil, but that good would win out, and the president is under an enormous amount of pressure.
Yes.
Major Garrett at the White House.
Donna, let me tackle this from a couple of different angles. Picking up on Garrett's first point about the pressure he believes the president is under. Clearly the White House feels it. Senior advisors to the president feel it. But I commend to all of us the president's first statement from the Oval Office on that Tuesday night after he returned to the Oval Office from traveling around the country because of the very real security danger afflicting and focused on Air Force One. There were several drafts of that speech, I have been told, many of them much tougher than the speech the president delivered. Much, much tougher, I have been told, by some senior White House advisors. The president toned those remarks down. He did not want to strike an immediate tone of vengeance or bloodlust from the Oval Office. What he wanted to try to do was send as calm and as reassuring signal as he could to the nation and to the rest of the world about the temperate and balanced approach he was going to take. Any president under those circumstances would have felt the very real compulsion to talk in words of vengeance, to sort of strike at that very real sense of outrage and horror all Americans felt. The president decided that he would do it a bit differently, and there was some internal second-guessing the next day within the White House. Was he strong enough? Did he strike as strong a note as the American public needed, they thought, some thought, the public needed to hear? The president had no second-guessing about that statement, and he has gradually stepped up the rhetoric in consistent methodology, we are told, as the military apparatus, as the intelligence service has gathered more information, and the president has become more internally confident about his ability to deal with this situation in a timely and effective manner. So I would only refer the nation to the president's own remarks, and you have seen him move in a direction steadily. But he resisted the temptation on that very first evening to be harsh and bellicose, even though some of those very type words were laid before him as options. He rejected them. And on Garrett's other point about the drug war, I can tell you this. The White House sees no analogy whatsoever, and in fact has spoken about the drug war in different terms. This president has often, even in the company of leaders from Peruvian countries who suffer much more gravely the real tragedies of the drug war than many Americans do, about the fault that lies in America on the demand side of this equation. So he's even spoken differently about the drug war. But this is not analogous in any way at this Bush White House. The victims of the terrorism attacks on Tuesday were innocent American civilians who never once brought anything approaching the harm that fell upon them in their direction, as the president has often argued Americans do who take drugs. So they don't see any analogy whatsoever with the drug war or its protracted and in some cases endless struggle. They do believe and are becoming ever more confident that they can find those responsible for these acts of terrorism and bring about, as the president has said, justice.
Major
Donna?
Garrett, Major, thanks very much. Let's go to Jeremiah in Georgia on the phone with us right now. Jeremiah?
I was calling towards the question of if we should take retaliation.
Jeremiah, could you start over for a minute? I missed the first part of what you were saying. Could you start over, please?
Yeah, I was calling in for the question: should we retaliate or not? I believe we should, because they were able to penetrate our security at the airport, and we were supposed to have a strong security then. Who says they're not going to be stupid enough or gutsy enough to try it again in a different form? You know, who says they're not going to put a bomb there in a car or something wild and crazy? Where do they come with these ideas anyway, and what have we done wrong to them for them to kill thousands of our innocent citizens for no reason?
General Clark, there's been some talk about, wondering who the enemy is, and I saw some wire reports and some of our reporting talking about that there were worries now still that perhaps this isn't all over and done with, that they were worried about further terrorist attacks and maybe in different forms. And we've had the first arrest, I think you've known with the updates on news here that we've been telling you about, one of the arrests of one of the people who was taken into custody, I believe, at one of the two New York airports on Thursday evening. I think it was JFK or LaGuardia. Those were, they took in like 10 or 12 people, and now they've had the first arrest. So what do you do to watch out, like Jeremiah says, for what could be coming in the next wave?
Well, you have to go back and go through a security analysis of all of your vulnerable systems. The airports, certainly, but also other things, our utilities, our public services. There's much more horrifying scenarios that could be constructed than what happened. And we need to make sure those scenarios never happen. So that's the first battle we're waging right now in the United States. Now, we don't know if we're winning or not, but we've got to do our best.
Well, I saw, too, the FBI was saying, although this person did not pass the lie detector test, so they're saying that perhaps this isn't accurate as they thought before, but there was a warning that maybe Boston, Atlanta, Richmond, Virginia might have also been targets during Tuesday's attacks. So now they wonder, because he didn't pass the lie detector test where they got some of this information, but they were talking about people are worried who work in skyscrapers. You know, they're nervous about that, and that gun sales are up. Particularly, they're edgy in Boston, where the first two planes that hit the World Trade Center towers hit.
Well, I think it would be really surprising if he only had 4 teams, and 3 of the 4 teams took over and were successful, in this case with these aircraft. So we don't know how many teams there really were and how many people are fleeing across the country trying to get away or waiting to try it in a different manner.
I'm sorry, Rick, could you tell me who the next caller is? Once again, Laura, Arizona. Hi, Arizona. Go right ahead.
Yeah, my point is, first of all, I really hope President Bush understands that we will be patient enough for them to do the smart thing. And I don't think the question is if we should retaliate. I think it's going to be how we're going to retaliate, because I believe as a world we're trying to unite, to come together. This is the extortionist, and we need... Any terrorist is just an extortionist. We need to, number one, figure out how to take away their power, how to really get to them as a world. We're all not going to put up with this. If some country wants to declare war, they need to declare war on us, like we're saying. Who are we going to retaliate against? An individual? And so I think they're on the right track. They're going to do the right thing, and I think most Americans have complete confidence in our leaders, and they're all seeming that they're going to get it right this time.
Laura
and
from Arizona.
I'm confident.
Thank you very much for your call. Did you finish your thought? Were you able to finish your thought there?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
But I think everyone so far, I think that our country's finally going to pull together, like the General said, and lead the world in showing how to get rid of terrorists once and for all, because you let extortionists in, they're going to keep doing it.
General Clark, what about that? You were involved, as we said before, 5 years. You trained leaders and soldiers, and many of them went to Desert Storm. How is the patience factor? Laura mentioned that, the United States, folks in the United States, she feels a lot of them would be patient. What do you think?
Well,
is there
patience
patience?
factor in the armed forces is great.
Right. How
patience
about the
factor in the
general
American public? Well, I think we're going to go through a certain set of stages after this campaign. I mean, first we're angry right now, and we're grieving right now. But I think as more of the facts come out, I think people will rally behind the president. He's going to set the pace of this based on the information that's given to him, what our capabilities are, and what makes sense, and I think the American people will support it. I think we're a mature population, and I think we certainly can hold our horses until we do the right thing in this.
General Clark, we're glad to have you here with us in Atlanta, our military consultant and former NATO commander. Thank you very much. As we carry on here, news that we've been bringing you, now they have 4 of the black boxes that have been found. One from the plane that hit the Pentagon and one from the plane that went down in Pennsylvania. Let's get the latest news for you with Jim Clancy and Colleen McEdwards. Jim and Colleen?
All right, Donna, interesting discussion. We're going to now give you a bit of a profile of the man that's the leading suspect and also take you to a country that is certainly going to be a key player in all of this.
That's right. We begin with Osama bin Laden. The man that some Bush administration officials are calling the prime suspect has long been at the top of the U.S. list of major sponsors of terrorism. Andrea Koppel looks at what the U.S. response might be if bin Laden were to be the target.
If, as the U.S. suggests, Osama bin Laden was the mastermind behind Tuesday's attacks, going after him and shutting down his al-Qaeda terrorist network will require more than just a military assault on Afghanistan. That's because over the years, al-Qaeda has become an international network with cells rooted in almost every region of the world. That's why Secretary of State Colin Powell has put the world on notice. The United States needs help.
I am not threatening so much as I am saying this has become a new benchmark, a new way of measuring the relationship and what we can do together in the future.
Since Tuesday, Powell has had the world on speed dial, in particular reaching out to countries where the U.S. says Islamic militant groups have links to bin Laden's network.
Once these people have been trained in Afghanistan, we know that they've gone to Africa, we know that they've gone to Asia, we know that they've gone back to the Middle East, and it's clear now that they've also come to the United States.
People like Ahmed Rassam, the man charged with attempting to bomb the United States over the millennium. He's a member of Algeria's armed Islamic group, but was trained by bin Laden. So were members of Pakistan's Harak-ul-Mujahideen group, which hijacked an Indian jetliner to Afghanistan in December 1999. On Friday, Pakistan's president informed the U.S. his country is prepared to take specific steps to help the U.S. wage its campaign against bin Laden. And in the Arab world, Powell has asked countries like Saudi Arabia to cut off the flow of money and resources to bin Laden. For Secretary Powell, who led Allied troops to victory in the Gulf War, this war against terrorists will be fought on an entirely different battlefield.
And so you have to design a campaign plan that goes after that kind of enemy. And it isn't always blunt force military, although that is certainly an option.
But diplomatic sources say whatever option the U.S. chooses to take, it will need the support of Islamic countries. Such support would send a strong message to bin Laden and his Islamic extremist supporters around the world. They have nowhere to hide. Andrea Koppel, CNN, at the State Department.
Now, as we have reported, the United States has presented Pakistan with ways that it could help in the aftermath of Tuesday's attacks. Friday, Pakistan's leadership pledged to, quote, fully cooperate. Officials in Washington, though, want to know how the broader military leadership there thinks. CNN's Tom Mantir is in Pakistan. He joins us now with more on that. Tom?
Jim, in the next 3/4 of an hour, we should know better what that level of cooperation between Pakistan and the United States will be. There is a National Security Council and a cabinet meeting that will be going on to discuss a meeting that occurred yesterday with all of the top military commanders, a lengthy meeting. At the end of the meeting, according to the Ministry of Information, they were unanimous in condemning terrorism and pledging the support to the United States. Now, the United States has put a list of specific demands to the Pakistani government, closing its door with with Afghanistan, stopping fuel supplies to the Taliban, and also, if required, allowing U.S. planes to fly over Pakistani airspace. In addition to that, possibly even more important is to provide human intelligence to the United States about Osama bin Laden. In 1998, when cruise missiles rained down on Afghanistan, they were largely ineffective because they didn't have that type of cooperation. Pakistan has pledged full cooperation with the United States. What they're waiting for, I'm sure,